On today's show, the Rockets extend the contract of head coach Ime Udoka and why Houston has the most leverage of any team currently in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. We're going to dive back into the Kevin Durant trade saga here in just a moment, with the reported offer from the Houston Rockets being leaked, as well as why Houston has the most leverage of any of the teams currently vying for Kevin Durant in the KD sweepstakes. But first, we start with the exciting news that the Rockets and head coach Ime Udoka have agreed to a contract extension, making him one of the highest paid coaches in the entire NBA. He was 2 years through his original 4-year contract that he signed when he was brought here a couple summers ago. And given the success that he's had since joining the Houston Rockets, it's an absolute no-brainer. Ime Udoka joined an organization that was frankly the laughingstock of the NBA, right? Coming off a 22-win season and a couple seasons prior to that where they hadn't won even that many games. And then, elevated them immediately that first year, 19-win improvement from 22 to 41 in his first year as the head coach. And then to further increase the production and go from 41 wins to 52 wins this past year, which could have even been better than 52 wins if they hadn't punted on the final 3 games of the season. It makes perfect sense why the Rockets would want to lock down Ime Udoka long-term. There's a lot of synergy between ownership and Tillman and Patrick Fertitta and the Rockets front office with Rafael Stone and Ime Udoka himself. They're all aligned. They all share very similar philosophies towards life, towards basketball, towards their approach to winning. And it makes perfect sense, given that level of organizational harmony, that they would want to guarantee that Ime Udoka would stick around in Houston long term. And especially coming off a year where he finished top 3 in coach of the year voting, that's probably in addition to the inquiries from the New York Knicks about wanting to potentially, poach Ime Udoka from the Rockets, probably gave Ime and his agent a little bit of leverage to be able to go ahead and get this deal done. A deal that is, again, makes him one of the highest paid head coaches in the NBA right now. His original deal was valued at just around like $7 million per year annually. So it was like something like 4 years, $28 million. It's not required that teams disclose the specific terms of these contracts. Some teams and organizations do elect to share the numbers specifically, while also some agents of head coaches elect to share these numbers. The Rockets are not one of them, but we do know from Shams Charania that the deal is worth at least $10 million per year, again, making him one of the highest paid head coaches in the NBA. And again, totally deserved, right? Ime took the Rockets from being a laughingstock to being one of the best teams in the NBA. And yes, it was a bit of a disappointing first round exit, but they took a very, very talented Warriors team all the way to 7 games. And look, I myself included, as many Rockets fans have been, less than enthused at times by the offensive schemes or lack thereof from Ime and his coaching staff. But at the end of the day, what he has done with this Rockets team, making them, carving them into a top 5 defense, watching the overall growth and development of so many of the young guys on this roster, Jalen Green becoming a more all-around player, Alperen Sengun going from, at times being a defensive liability earlier in his career to being, first off, being, deployed properly defensively is a big part of it, but now being, Sengun being the backbone of a top 5 defensive team and being utilized in a variety of ways defensively, seeing Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason really excelling in their roles under a defensive-minded head coach, watching the exponential growth of someone like a Thompson, who has gotten so much better in just his 2 short years of his NBA career, all under Ime Udoka. It's a no-brainer. It makes perfect sense why the Rockets would want to extend him. And I think the biggest takeaway from this extension, right, is that the Rockets, they believed this when they hired Ime Udoka originally. At no point did the Rockets even remotely think that Ime was going to be like a stopgap head coach, that they were just, hey, we'll bring him in, we'll see if he works, and maybe down the line we'll consider moving. Like, the Rockets very much felt when they hired Ime Udoka that he was a championship caliber head coach and that he was going to be the guy that would be able to deliver this team a title, deliver this city a title, and get them back to the promised land. And that's what this contract extension says. It is a reward for how incredible things have been in just the first 2 years of Ime Udoka's Houston tenure. But it's also a sign that they still fully believe in him and that they want and trust that Ime Udoka will be the guy coaching this Rockets team down the line when they're vying for titles and when they have a shot to bring another title to the city of Houston, potentially as early as next season, depending on what happens with the KD saga ultimately. But it's really exciting. Happy for Ime, happy for the Rockets. And I will say one more note here is I want to give a lot of credit to ownership, right? Tillman and Patrick Fertitta. And I gave them a ton of credit back when Udoka was originally hired, because at the end of the day, the way NBA teams are structured, there is no limit on how much you pay a head coach or their respective assistant coaches. All of that is simply just like financial pain tolerance from ownership. How much is ownership willing to spend to have the competitive advantage of a good head coach and a good coaching staff underneath him? And the Rockets were willing to pay like crazy to get Ime Udoka in Houston in the first place. And now they are willing to up the ante, right? They're willing to give him that extension and make him one of the highest paid head coaches in the entire NBA in order to guarantee that he is here long-term. Not every ownership group is willing to do that. And so a ton of credit to Tillman and Patrick Fertitta for willing to pay what is deserved to Ime, right? To pay him accordingly for what he has been able to accomplish so far and what they believe he will be able to accomplish down the line. Again, Ime widely regarded as one of the best coaches in the NBA, probably a top, I always routinely say top 5 head coach, and that is the general consensus when it comes to Ime, is that he is a top 5 head coach in the association. He's not without his warts. No head coach is, but the good significantly and far outweighs any of the bad that comes with Ime Udoka, and the proof is certainly in the pudding with how the Rockets have been under his first 2 years. Excited for what is to come. And again, congratulations to Ime, and it's some great news to be able to talk about and share on the show. I want your thoughts. How do you feel about the extension for Ime Udoka? He will be the Houston Rockets' long-term head coach. Again, we don't know the specifics on the deal, how many years, all that stuff, but he'll be here for the foreseeable future. Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, Houston's reported offer for Kevin Durant so far, as well as why the Rockets have the most leverage of any of the teams involved in these Kevin Durant trade discussions. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Car Gurus. Look, shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel pretty overwhelming. That's why I love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. Look, my girlfriend and I, we were in the market looking to swap out her current car, and Car Gurus made the process so much easier. We haven't settled on a new car yet, but one of the features that I absolutely love is the price drop alert. So you know exactly when the perfect car is available that fits your budget. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com, cargurus.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's go ahead and continue on here with the Kevin Durant trade saga and the latest bit of reporting regarding the Houston Rockets, coming from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points. The Rockets are viewed as a prime destination, one of the finalists for Durant, sources said. Durant has a strong relationship with head coach Ime Udoka, who just signed a contract extension with the team that makes him one of the highest paid coaches in the NBA, and Houston offers a clear path to contend for a championship in the Western Conference. Jalen Green and the 10th pick in this year's draft present a clear opportunity for the Rockets to swing a deal, but the Suns have demanded more, sources said. Jabari Smith Jr., Tari, Eason, and Reed Shepherd are among the young talents in Houston that Phoenix has expressed interest in. The Rockets have not been willing to part with any of the three to this point. From the Suns' perspective, they don't view Green as a positive asset in these trade talks. The young guard struggled in the Rockets' playoff run this season, and the Suns have discussed potential paths with other teams that could help facilitate a potential Durant trade by acquiring Green for other assets that would go to Phoenix. Not much progress has been made with this. Should the Rockets change their stance and offer more draft picks and or young talents like Smith or Eason to the Suns, there is a clear path to a deal being completed before the draft, sources said. All right, a lot to unpack here from this latest bit of reporting. First of which is that, unfortunately, Jalen Green is widely viewed as a depreciated asset. The Suns don't want him, and I don't really believe this is posturing from Phoenix. This is the dilemma coming off of a playoff, series in which he struggled as badly as he did against the Warriors. There are still going to be teams out there, likely some of the bottom feeder teams at the bottom of the standings in each of the respective conferences, that would still look at Jalen Green and think, you know what? We believe in his potential. We still think he has the chance to be a star in the NBA, and we'd love to take a swing, right? Because maybe they just don't have a piece of, a talent on their team similar to Jalen Green. They don't have somebody with that potential top end outcome. And so there is still a pathway here to a Rockets, Suns, and then a third team maybe facilitating a trade where the offer is just Jalen Green and the 10th pick, but Jalen Green gets rerouted to a third team, and that third team is willing to give up future capital and or current assets or players back to the Phoenix Suns because they are bought in on the belief that Jalen Green maybe just needs a change of scenery, or maybe he needs a team with 5-out spacing full time in order to really maximize his abilities or something to that degree, right? A team that looks at Jalen and thinks that he could be the right fit for their organization. And for the Rockets in these discussions, the fact that they haven't been willing to put forth any of Jabari or Tari or Reed to this point speaks volumes about kind of the angling here. And the fact that they are they're under zero pressure to make a Kevin Durant trade. I know for a fact and for a certainty, right? The Rockets are more than content to just run things back. They are. They have a young, blossoming core. They have zero pressure to feel like they need to win in the next year or two. That much is true. However, there is also a belief, right, that this Thunder team isn't unstoppable. They're not the KD era Warriors. They're not just steamrolling through teams left and right. As much as it looked like that in the regular season, especially here in the postseason, watching the Nuggets push them to 7, watching the Pacers, force a game 7 here in the finals. If the Rockets are able to essentially turn just Jalen Green and the 10th pick into Kevin Durant, that immediately vaults them into contention right now. No other moves necessary. And that gives you a legitimate window of 2 to 3 years where you very well could walk away with a title and still have that incredibly bright future with all this young talent on the roster. That's why it's the best of both worlds kind of scenario. And that's why in every single one of these shows that we've done and all these discussions, we've talked about, yes, KD in Houston makes perfect sense depending on the cost. As long as you don't overpay for Kevin Durant, given his age, given the injury concerns, all of it, which is totally valid criticism. But if you're telling me that there are Rockets fans that can legitimately sit here with a straight face and say that they wouldn't give up Jalen Green and salary filler and the 10th pick for KD, I want some of whatever you're smoking. Because what it shows me, especially in this reporting, that if that's all the Rockets have been willing to put on the table so far, is that the Rockets believe more in Kevin Durant's potential immediate impact and how much he would elevate this team to true contention status for the next 2 to 3 years than they do in any potential hypothetical down the line where Jalen Green does continue to grow, evolve, become a better player, which is a distinct possibility at this point. Like, this is what gets lost in some of these discussions, is that by no stretch of the imagination is Jalen Green a bad player. In fact, he's a good player. He is. He just might not be as good as the Rockets ultimately need him to be in his current role on this team in order for them to win at the highest level. You need star players to win in the NBA. You need alphas. You need those top 20, top 15, top 10 kind of guys to be able to elevate you and to elevate those around you. And through 4 years, Jalen Green hasn't really been that kind of player, unfortunately. And maybe there's a chance for him to still grow and turn into that player down the line. But that's what this reporting tells me. And if a trade does go through that ultimately is KD to Houston and the outgoing pieces are Jalen Green and the 10th overall pick, that's what that tells me, that the Rockets believe more strongly in their conviction about KD's ability to elevate the team right now than any version of this team being led by Jalen Green further down the line. And that might be harsh. And that might be a misread on the situation since Jalen Green is only 23 years old. But they have the internal data. They have the numbers. They've seen the games just like we have. They've watched all 4 seasons of Jalen Green. And these conversations wouldn't even be taking place if the Rockets truly believed that, no, Jalen Green, untouchable, right? Jalen Green is our future. We're bought in on him. We believe he has the chance to be the best player on a contending team. The Rockets wouldn't even be rumored to be in these discussions if they didn't have their doubts about Jalen Green to be able to deliver at the highest level. That being said, they're also still content to roll the dice if the price becomes too steep, which is why they're in these discussions in the first place. Because again, if you can get KD for just Jalen in the 10th pick, it's a slam dunk deal. That's KD for pennies on the dollar. And you still have all your other young pieces. You still have all your other draft assets. And you have the chance to still grow and improve and allow guys like Thompson and Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason and Cam Whitmore and Reed Shepard. All these other young guys still have the chance to grow and get better and better and better, while also still simultaneously being able to compete at the highest level right now with KD as your best player temporarily. And what I will say is, looking at these potential pieces here, I would argue that, this reporting and the fact that these trade discussions are even taking place, right? It signifies that the Rockets are a lot lower on Jalen Green than they have really let on, right? Because they don't want to lose Jabari or Tari. They do value Dillon Brooks immensely to what he provides to this team. They don't want to lose Reed Shepard. And so Jalen being the first name that's getting thrown around in these trade discussions really does speak volumes about where this organization is currently and where they're ultimately headed down the line, even if a KD trade doesn't happen. Not saying the writing is on the wall necessarily for Jalen Green, but again, these trade discussions are happening for a reason. And if the Rockets did value Jalen Green more than Jabari Smith Jr. or more than Tari Eason or more than Reed Shepard, then guess what? That's the trade offer that would be on the table for KD. And as it stands with the Phoenix Suns, based on everything we know about what the Suns are trying to get back for KD, if the Rockets offer was that package of Dillon Brooks and Jabari and filler, and then maybe the 10th pick, they would snap that up immediately and walk away incredibly satisfied that they got back a win-now player, a rotation piece in Dillon Brooks, a young prospect with a ton of potential in Jabari, and the 10th overall pick. But it doesn't seem like that trade offer's on the table. And the reason that's not on the table is because the Rockets value those players internally more than they currently value Jalen Green. That's at least my read on the situation, trying to sift through the tea leaves of these discussions and trying to figure things out. Coming up, I do want to get into why the Rockets have the most leverage in these KD trade discussions and why they will win no matter what the outcome is. Whether KD ends up in Houston or not, the Rockets are going to be sitting pretty. And we're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. Look, there's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summertime. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. My girlfriend and I, we just did some kind of touching up on the patio out there, added a few new lounge chairs, and it's awesome. We can invite people over, have hangouts on the back patio, playing, card games, board games, having some drinks, just hanging out in our own little slice of heaven. And you can do that too. You can renovate your space with Wayfair. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's wayfair.com, Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, going back to what we discussed there in that second segment, in kind of trying to see how the Rockets maybe value some of these assets that are being discussed and kicked about in these possible trade discussions with the Phoenix Suns, I will say the one piece, probably the singular most valuable piece in any of these discussions that I firmly believe the Rockets are going to be very unlikely to include in any potential trade permutation. Again, maybe they are willing to ultimately part with a little bit more than just Jalen Green in the 10th pick, because they do really believe in the potential success of this team led by a Kevin Durant for the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe they would be willing to toss Jabari Smith Jr. into the trade. Maybe they would be willing to part ways with Tari Eason, or maybe they do throw Cam Whitmore in there as a sweetener. These are all distinct options, but they have the baseline, the framework, and they have zero incentive to improve upon that offer until they know that another team, be it the Spurs or the Heat or a dark horse team or a distant team like the Wolves, comes in with a better offer. They don't need to budge. And again, even if they do have potentially some doubts about Jalen Green's possible future, and that's why he's potentially in these trade talks to begin with, they're also still very content to just move things along, bank on continuity, see the continued growth of the young guys, and then be in prime position to pounce on the next available star that becomes available. Because you do have to remember, right? Ime Udoka wants to win titles. Ime Udoka wants to be in the playoffs. He wants to win championships. He was pissed when the Rockets didn't make the playoffs his first year as head coach. He was like, I've never missed the playoffs in my entire career, and I don't plan on starting now. And unfortunately, he did. And you can bet that Ime was probably more pissed than anybody about how that series ended against the Warriors. And for a guy who's coached KD before, for a guy who knows just how much KD can elevate a team when given the right pieces around him, the right supporting cast, it's going to be hard to argue that Ime Udoka wouldn't absolutely love to swap out Jalen Green for Kevin Durant, assuming you were able to keep all else equal on the roster without overpaying again, that is. But I will say the Rockets are going to be in perfect position regardless of what happens. Whether they swing a KD trade and they get him and then they're, immediately thrown in that championship conversation next season, or even if they don't get KD. And part of the reason for that is that 2027 pick has so much value. Because here's the thing. Even if, in whatever version, whether the Rockets do or do not get KD, KD's being traded one way or the other. There is a 0% chance that Kevin Durant is still rocking a Phoenix Suns jersey at the start of this next season. It ain't happening. He's going somewhere. And the Suns are hell-bent on trying to compete with Devin Booker and whatever they get back from the KD trade and the corpse of Bradley Beal with his no trade clause sticking out of his tombstone. Like, it's not gonna be pretty. In all reality, it's gonna be a mess. And even if they do have some semblance of success over these next couple years, maybe they're like a plucky, 7-8 seed, whatever. Devin Booker, the clock is ticking on him too, for his chance to win a title, for his chance to compete at the highest level. And unless we get like Damian Lillard loyalty saga part 2, I would fully believe that if after a couple seasons of the retooled Phoenix Suns failing to make any semblance of a push in the Western Conference, which is a total bloodbath, then all it's going to take is one Devin Booker trade demand, right? Hey, the Suns are going to try to get him his contract extension this offseason. He'll have that on the books. He'll give it the old college try for the next year or two. And, maybe it looks good, maybe it doesn't, but the likelihood of it not looking good is significantly higher than it actually working out. And when it ultimately doesn't work out in Phoenix, their only recourse is going to be to trade Devin Booker and to try and recoup some semblance of value for him. And at that point, he'll be 30. He'll be right in the middle of his prime. They won't be able to get as much value for him if they did try to trade him right now as they would 2 years from now. But especially if he's, a distressed asset, especially if he's somebody that wants out of a bad situation. And guess what? The Rockets are going to be sitting there smiling ear to ear, watching the Phoenix Suns continue to implode, holding that 2027 first round pick firmly in their hands. And that outcome happens regardless of the KD trade. KD could be in Houston and we could still witness the Suns continuing implosion. Or KD could be with the Mavericks, dark horse team, whatever. He could be with the Spurs or the Heat or the Wolves. And Phoenix may still well be imploding. That 2027 pick has such tremendous value to the Rockets and unfortunately to the Suns. And I've even seen some Rockets fans suggest, you know what? Table the KD talks. Don't bother with KD. Run it back. Have continuity. And then be in position to pounce in 2 years when that 2027 pick comes due and the Suns are floundering, right? And they want to move on from Devin Booker. And that pick looks like it's going to convey as a top 10, top 5 pick, top 3 pick, whatever. And then make that pick the cornerstone of a Devin Booker deal. Honestly, maybe the Rockets do completely, swing and miss out on the KD deal. Maybe they are unwilling to move on from any of the other young core outside of just Jalen Green. Wouldn't be my preferred outcome at this stage, but because they're not under any semblance of pressure to win right now, because the clock isn't really ticking on anybody on this roster, yeah, you could just run it back. You could just bank on continuity. Maybe you do bank on Jalen Green recouping some of his possible trade value and, excelling and growing and continuing to look a little bit better. And maybe he has a playoff series next year where he actually, I'm not going to say dominates, but just looks better, right? Maybe he does dominate, right? And maybe that completely changes the narrative on him and on the Rockets and the overall trajectory of the team. And then maybe we look back on this entire trade, saga with KD and we're like, whew, dodged a bullet there. Jalen Green's the truth. But even if that doesn't happen, Rockets are still going to be in a really good position. Even if Jalen Green kind of stagnates, even if he's just more or less of the same of what he is right now as a player, and there's not any more leaps to be had, no more improvement in his game, the Rockets are still going to be in a fantastic position a couple years down the line from now, assuming the Suns continue to struggle and implode, to revisit a trade with the Suns. Be like, hey, all right, it didn't work out before with KD. Guess what? We have that 2027 pick. Y'all want to play ball now? And then it'll be more or less another stalemate between the Suns, who, have a star who potentially wants out of a bad situation, and the Rockets, who own their draft capital. And to make matters even worse, if that is the direction that the Suns organization ultimately goes, if they do try with Devin Booker and it fails miserably, and then D-Book puts a trade demand in and wants out, they also still own the 2029 first round pick. Like, the Rockets have the Suns by the cojones here. They do. I don't even know if I can say that on the show. Oops. But with that, like, the Rockets are going to be in a great position either way. The difference simply is just, do you want this team to have a chance to contend at the highest level right now, rather than slow playing things and seeing how these guys develop down the line, which it seems to, and again, everything that I know about this organization, everything that I've come to learn and know about Ime Udoka, I'm sure he wants the best possible chance to win a title sooner rather than later, even though he's signed up long-term, even though there's no inclination that he's going to like try to sneak his way out of Houston or wants to move to a different organization. Hell, he could have gone and coached the Knicks. He could have. And that's not a conversation the Rockets or Udoka were even remotely considering of entertaining, right? He wants to be here in Houston, and he wants to win at the highest level with this Rockets team. And Kevin Durant gives them that chance to win at the highest level right here, right now, while also still being one of the best teams for the foreseeable future for the next 5+ years, assuming they're able to keep most of this young core together without giving up too much to the Phoenix Suns. So with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. I definitely want your thoughts on the latest reporting in the Kevin Durant trade saga. Are you cool with giving up Jalen Green and the 10th overall pick for KD plus salary filler, or is that still too much in your eyes? And if it is, why is it too much? And do you really believe that the Rockets would be better off long-term by not making that trade and by sticking with the continuity and seeing what Jalen Green can ultimately become rather than getting a top 10 player right now? Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about Ime's extension, all that good stuff. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.